The Pittsburgh Penguins were victorious in their season opener in Hunter. There is just but one song that comes to mind. Start spreading the news. The Rangers are losers today. We're going to recap the game right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at synonym for wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's Twitter account a follow at LO_Penguins. You can also find us on Instagram at LockedOn_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Plus, if you follow us on YouTube, be sure to hit the notification button. That way you can be among the first to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Before we jump into the recap of last night's victory, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com, and you could win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. More on them later. Hunter, I said it in the opening, 3-0 victory at Madison Square Garden for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And here's how I want to structure this episode. I know it, you know it, our listeners know it. We want to talk about the young guys. We want to talk about Kindel. We want to talk about Harrison Brunicke. Let's park that to the second segment because there is a lot to say about them. But we got to talk about what was maybe as close to a flawless victory that we have seen from the Pittsburgh Penguins in quite some time. Now, I'll get the caveat out of the way. This doesn't mean you need to start putting deposits down for playoff tickets. This doesn't mean that suddenly they're going to be a competitive playoff team, but it was a very good start for a roster with some young players, new faces, and a brand new coaching staff. And let's start with this. They played maybe the best team defense I have seen them play in years. Yes, Artur Shilov's got a shutout in his Penguins debut against former Penguins coach Mike Sullivan, but he may have faced 25 shots, but his work rate was not very high.
I love natural stat trick, but there is no way the Rangers had 13 high danger chances at 5-on-5 in that game. It felt like they only had 2 to 3 at best. The Penguins did such a good job of limiting the Rangers to the outside. Their forecheck was giving the Rangers fits throughout. I mean, New York couldn't even break the puck out of their own zone for most of that game, Pat. And when they were able to get out of their own zone, it was a lot of one and dones. The zone exits for the Penguins were a lot more simple, a lot more crisp compared to what we've seen over the last few years. And all of that was just really frustrating the Rangers. They could not get their forecheck going to save their lives. And I felt like this performance, it was a very professional performance from the Penguins. There was nothing flashy. But again, they clogged up the passing lanes. They prevented the Rangers from breaking out. Ben Kindel's hockey IQ, we'll get into that a little bit later, stood out once again. Erik Karlsson's positioning was sensational. That's one of the best games I've seen Karlsson play as a member of the Penguins. Artur Shilov's gets a shutout, even though I was low-key surprised to see him start. I thought they were going to give this to Jari, even though his preseason was so-so, just because he's been here for a while. He's a vet, but Dan Muse was like, no, I'm going to reward Shilov's for having a better camp in preseason. And I think he deserves the next start on Thursday, if we're being honest. Like, you got to keep putting more pressure on Jari to say, hey, if Shilov is going to keep playing like this, you're going to have to really step it up. So I would give Shilov's another start, but you said it about the defending too. That's the best I've seen the Penguins defend, especially in the third period in a few years. The way that they were flat out taking it to the Rangers in that third period. I mean, the Rangers could hardly get anything going, even when trailing. It felt like that game was never in jeopardy, despite the Penguins only having a 1-goal lead. They were getting some chances in that period. They weren't giving up much to Shilov's. They made his job pretty easy last night. if we're being even more honest. So I just loved that start from the Penguins. Dan Muse had a great game plan, executed it to perfection, and it's a nice start. It's only one game, but I was really happy with that type of performance. It was such a breath of fresh air, Pat, compared to what we've seen in the last few years. And again, I'm no Mike Sullivan hater, but man, it was fun seeing him storm off the bench like that. Like he was pretty pissed off. I gotta lie. I chuckled to myself a little bit, and it was nice seeing a new staff breathe some new blood into this team. I think it's really needed it. And you saw that last.
The thing I noticed about Muse's system to start this season, I noticed it a little bit in preseason, but I try not to dive too deep into film study and X's and O's in the preseason because you have a lot of players trying to make the roster. You're going to have some players who try to do too much. You're going to have some players who break from systems, some players who aren't going to make the team that can't quite execute the system correctly. So I try not to put too much weight into it in the preseason. But one thing I noticed in the preseason, and it was extremely evident last night, this system that Dan Muse is employing, especially in both the offensive and defensive zones, is very heavy on puck support.
Yeah.
You go back and watch last night's game, there were at any and all times 2 to 3 Penguins in the vicinity of the puck. There was no backing off. There was no trying to get yourself to a more advantageous position. The system was based on, we are going to pressure you at the point of attack. And whether we get it or not is irrelevant because there's going to be at least 1, maybe 2 Penguins in the area as well. So whatever outlet you try to make, you're going to be under pressure again. And a lot of people will hear that and think, oh, that's what Mike Sullivan did, and not totally the same thing, because it wasn't dependent on high speed or heavy pressure. It was making sure that all the points of attack were cut off when the other team has possession of the puck. Speaking of that, we do have to talk about, at least real quickly, the goal scorer, Justin Brazeau, gets a phenomenal goal, ends up being the game winner in the late in the first period, Evgeny Malkin pushes the puck through Vincent Trocheck's legs off a faceoff. Brazeau all by himself in front. Great slick little move, puts it past Shesterkin. That eventually becomes the game winner. Brazeau adds an empty netter, so does Blake Lizotte. But at the end of the day, when I look at this game from last night, this was a full team effort, top to bottom. I really can't name a player who didn't at least have an average game for the Penguins.
I could probably name a couple. I thought Koivunen could be a little bit better, and I think he will be. I don't think Caleb Jones played really well for most of this game. Still curious what the eval is on that. But I felt like, to me, even on the bottom pairing role with Brunicke, I think he could have been a little bit better. But again, that's me being a little nitpicky. I think everyone else had at least an average performance. And that does include Harrison Brunicke. Pat, we'll get to that in just a second as well. But yeah, the 2 big pillars of Muse's system, it's puck support and puck pressure. You saw both on display all night on Tuesday. The forecheck, again, consistently gave the Rangers problems whenever they attempted to transition from defense to offense. And on the other side, the Penguins always had, at least from my eye test, more than one forward helping out on their own breakouts. And again, just kept everything really simple coming out of their own zone. And they were hounds on the puck all night. Very tough to play against. That is what I think. It's funny. First game, that's what Dan Muse's system looks like when everything is working. I think that's the blueprint for the Penguins for the rest of the year in terms of especially playing against better opponents, because there's going to be a lot of better teams that they play against. Let's be real here. So that, I think, has to be the blueprint. And, shout out to Archer Shilovs once again. He was great, made the saves he needed to make. His glove side was a little bit shaky to start out, but he still was able to make the saves he needed to make throughout that game. And I would give him another start on Thursday. As for Justin Brazeau, Pat, is anyone still overreacting to him being on the second line right now? I saw a lot of that earlier this week when the lines were dropping during practice. I think it's okay for a little bit, guys. Brian Russ returned to practice today. He's been cleared for contact. I expect him back probably around the California trip, maybe a little bit before. I would think that Brazeau is probably going to move down the lineup a little bit to the bottom 6 once that move is official, but He gets 2 goals last night. I thought he played well. I thought Evgeny Malkin also was spectacular. Had his legs last night. He was setting up chances left and right. That nifty little feed to Brazeau off the face-off was great. Alexei Lafreniere was totally fooled there. If you go back and watch that a couple of times, he tried to cheat a little bit, start going up ice, but didn't realize that Brazeau was cutting to the net, and then he roofs it past Shesterkin. So just a really nice play all around there. And I thought Anthony Mantha also had a really good game. I know people are going to harp on him for that bad pass to Kindel. I get it. Probably could have been a bit better, but I thought he had some really good chances, especially, later on in the game when Chris Letang, who I also thought played well, more on him later, he chipped the puck right at the blue line, a small little play on a pinch right to Anthony Mantha, who had a mini breakaway. Better save from Shesterkin, but I really like that play from both of those players there. But really nice first win. See if they'll continue it against the Islanders.
It's a good start for sure. We have to be happy with it. But again, don't start putting those deposits down on playoff tickets yet. It's one game. We've got 81 more to go. But I don't think you could have drawn up a better start for the Penguins in the Dan Muse era. But if there was one thing that was pretty good for the start, it's Benjamin Kindel and Harrison Brunicke. We will focus an entire segment on the teenagers who made their NHL debut at MSG on Tuesday night. We will do that when we get back right after this. Before we do that, though, we've got to tell you about today's first sponsor, and that is Indeed. You just realized your business needs to hire someone yesterday, so how can you find that amazing candidate fast? Easy, just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. I've said it before when Indeed has been on this show. While I've never had to use it as someone who had to hire, I have been using it as somebody who was on the job hunt, and it got me plenty of interviews and helped me find my current job. It is a fantastic service. So the pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now to support our show and say you heard about it on this very podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Back here on the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast, I'm Patrick Damp, right alongside Hunter Hodes, and we've made our listeners wait long enough. Got to talk about the NHL debuts of Benjamin Kindel and Harrison Brunicke. Let's start with Harrison Brunicke because it started off pretty rough. His first shift wasn't great, takes a penalty, even if I thought it was a bit of a dive, but
both penalties last night were dives.
I would agree with you in that regard. But the thing I did say about his penalty, though, is most NHL officials are going to call that, and that will come with experience for Harrison Brunicke because when the guy goes down like that, it is going to end up being on the defenseman or the skater who makes him go down, even if it's kind of ticky-tack. He will learn that the longer he plays, but I think he put that behind him, and he played really well for the majority of the game. The biggest thing to me is this: that rough first shift. He gets put out there with the big three along with Ben Kindel. Really nice touch by Dan Muse, putting the guys making their NHL debuts to start the game with the guys who are starting their 20th season together. Really nice little nod to his team. But that could have been a spiral moment for Harrison Brunicke. You take a penalty on your first shift. It's the opening game. It's your first game in the bigs. But he stayed cool, stayed calm. The Penguins kill the penalty. And I thought for the rest of the game, he played pretty darn well.
I think the first period he had that first game jitters. And I actually thought during that first shift, the Penguins had the Rangers hemmed in their own zone for a good while there. Sidney Crosby was doing Sidney Crosby things, generating scoring chances. I thought Letang was looking well. Malkin, Kindel was playing well. Even Brunicke was too. Until he takes the penalty, you could tell he was nervous. And then later on in that period, just making a couple plays in his own zone where I was like, yeah, you definitely have the first game jitters. You look nervous out there. Definitely wasn't a good period, Pat, but I will give him credit. He bounced back in the second and third periods, and I think overall had a average performance. I think it was fine when you sum it all up, and I do think it's going to be better going forward. You got that first game out of the way. Now you can start to settle in a little bit, especially over these next 8 games where you try to convince the coaching staff to keep you up for a full season. So I was fine with his overall performance. Ben Kindel, I mean, he was outstanding all game long. There was one play, Pat, where it looked like he had a third eye in the back of his head. That pass to Tomasino was like a no-look pass, and Tomasino almost scores. I'm like, how did you know he was there? But then you think about it for a millisecond, it's like, oh yeah, again, his hockey IQ stood out once again. There was another play later in the game where he sold out to block a shot from the point. And it's like, it's the little things like that that are going to go a long way, I think, for his development. He was getting scoring chances throughout. I know there was the one play, especially where Anthony Mantha tried to set him up, and it just wasn't a good pass, and Kindel just whiffed on the puck, but I'm not going to blame Kindel on that. Mantha just has to make a better pass there, and he knew it. Like, he kind of slammed his stick down. He knew he needed to deliver a better pass there to Kindel, but I thought he was tremendous all game long. His skating was great. His hockey IQ stood out once again. His defensive work in his own zone was once again really good. That was a really nice first start if he wants to convince this coaching staff and management to potentially burn a year of his ELC. It's one game, Pat. We got potentially 8 more before a decision comes. That's a real nice start. And I thought he did a good job centering Tommy Novak and Philip Tomasino. Just a great game.
It was, like you said, it's one game, and it obviously, you don't want to overreact to it, but it was a tremendous step in the correct direction for him to make a case to stay in the NHL, because not only does he do everything you said, plays just over 15 minutes, he goes 4 for 5 in the faceoff circle. And if you look at the centers that New York has, say whatever you will about their overall abilities, New York's a pretty good face-off team. Kindel goes in and goes 4 for 5. Granted, 4 for 5 is not that many when you break down how many face-offs there are in a game, but he had 5 opportunities. He won 4 of them. That's pretty good for an 18-year-old, especially going up against some pretty darn good centers. And then you dig into the analytics of it. He has 53% of the shot attempts when on the ice at 5-on-5 when his line's on the ice, and 75% of the high danger percentage when he's on the ice. The kid was driving offense every time pretty much he stepped over the boards. And again, one game against an opponent that I think we're starting to learn might not be as good as they think they are, which is kind of been why I've struggled to evaluate the Rangers, because in theory, it should be at least a playoff team, if not an above average team. But then at the same time, you go out and watch the way they played last night. And I'll go on a quick tangent here and we'll get back to Kindel. They didn't look inspired at all. That just looked like a team that really didn't have a lot of passion or fire for the game.
You know what it reminded me of? The 24-25 Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, a little bit.
Honestly, like, JT Miller looked awful. He looks hurt, by the way, but he was terrible last night. Panarin, I don't really think was that good. Zibanejad wasn't really good. Lafreniere, again, got dusted on that first Brazeau goal. I just didn't see that level of compete, that fire from the Rangers. They were just kind of going through the motions. And I don't understand how some people have that team as a lock for the playoffs. I think they're going to have to really earn their spot if they get in. And I said that during the preview on Tuesday when you were on IR with your little stomach bug. I felt like this was a game that could be had for the Penguins. Like, I look at the bottom 6 of the Rangers, it's not good. I look at the bottom 2 pairings, it's not good. And what do you know? The Penguins had their way with this team. They were the faster team, which is saying something, because I still don't think they're that fast, especially when you compare them to a lot of these other teams in the league, especially like the New Jersey Devils, Carolina Hurricanes, and stuff like that. But the Rangers just looked overly slow in this game, which was nuts. And just to take it one step further, going back to Kindel, Pat, Few more underlying numbers. 14:37 of 5-on-5 ice time last night. When he was on the ice, Penguins had 55.5% of the shot attempts, 54% expected goals rate, 64 scoring chances for rate, 75, as you said, high danger chances for rate. Pretty good in your debut. He was driving offense every time he was out there. Again, awesome stuff. I do think you may see a line mate change for him on Thursday. We'll preview that for our next episode, but I do think Philip Hollander is going to be taking someone's spot there after I was at practice today.
I would not be surprised to see that. But last thing on Kindel, and this is this is strictly based in eye test and vibe test, did not look out of place whatsoever.
Agreed.
The one thing, and this is also eye test, but based on the way I watched the game, he was not afraid to go to high danger areas. He was not afraid to go to the corner. He was not afraid to work on the walls. He was not afraid to go to the front of the net. And he's not the biggest kid. That has kind of been our knock on him in this lead up to this season, is that he's still pretty small relatively for NHL standards. He's 18 years old. He's going to grow a little bit. He's going to physically mature. But you look at the way he played last night, he was playing like a kid who's been there for a while, playing like a kid who the spotlight wasn't too big. And we can make our jokes and post our memes about the New York Rangers, but there is an aura to going to Madison Square Garden on the NHL's opening night on national television against an Original Six franchise that even some of the most seasoned players will feel that pressure. And for Kindel, just looked like he was out there playing hockey.
First off, I can't believe you just said aura. So there's the reference for the kids out there. But
the kids didn't invent the word aura. It's existed forever. They don't get to claim that, okay?
Hey, I keep hearing it all the time from some of my nephews who are like 17 years old, and all they say is like aura, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But I didn't think I'd hear you say that on the show, but I had to mess with you a little bit. But the moment never looked too big for him, and he looked like he belonged on that ice against some of these really established NHL veterans. Again, only one game, Pat. He's going to have to do a lot more over these next 8 potentially to stay up for the rest of the year. But that was a great start. He was one of the best players on the ice last night. Wasn't even close. I thought Sid was really good once again. Gino had an amazing game last night. And I do want to shout out Chris Letang as well. He was tremendous all night long, especially being paired next to Ryan Shea, who shouldn't be in your top 4. But again, they're not trying to compete this year, so it's whatever. But I thought Letang, great in his own zone, made their correct pinches. Again, that little chip play to Anthony Mantha later on in the game was really good. I liked his effort, and I especially loved the game Erik Karlsson played. One of the best games he's played as a Penguin. Always in position, knew when to pinch, knew when to pull back, was driving offense all night long, even though he didn't get any points during this game. He was still great, so I want to shout him out too.
It was a really great performance, top to bottom for me. I know that you nitpicked a little bit. I don't disagree with the nitpicks, but to put a bow on this segment, really, really good first performances from Harrison Brunicke and Ben Kindel. A good step on the right direction, making a case for maybe they should stay past the 9-game tryout. But again, it's a start. We'll see what happens over the next few games. That is going to do it, though, for this middle segment. When we come back, it's Wednesday, so you know what that means. It's time for us to give out our MVPs of the week as part of Warrior Helmet Wednesday, so stick with us. We'll do that right after this. Before we do that, though, we've got to tell you about today's second sponsor, and that is FanDuel. The NFL season is in full swing, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if that bet wins. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel makes watching football even more exciting, especially when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Back here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins, I'm Patrick Damp, running right alongside Hunter Hodes. I'm off IR. I'm back on the show. My tummy doesn't hurt as much as it did yesterday. Good news for me, which means I'm back in time for one of my favorite segments of Locked On Penguins, Warrior Helmet Wednesday. If you are new to the show, this is a thing we started a couple of seasons ago. We're paying homage to the 2016 Stanley Cup winning Penguins. In the locker room after the game, the players would give out their player of a game after a win with a cool little Warrior helmet. So we've adopted that to give our MVPs of the week. Hunter, I will start with you. Who are you giving this week's Warrior helmet to?
So I know there's only been one regular season game, but I kind of have to go a little obvious here. Justin Brazeau gets the first Warrior helmet of the regular season for me with the Pittsburgh Penguins. 2 goals last night. The first one, really nice move in front of the net to beat Igor Shesterkin. Gets the empty net goal to really ice the game. I thought he was great all game long. Used his size to his advantage. There was a few moments when a few Rangers tried to take a couple runs at him and they just kind of bounced right off him just because he's such a big dude. So I thought, again, he was physical, brought the offense. He was fine defensively. I thought he was totally fine next to Evgeny Malkin and Anthony Mantha. I don't think that's going to stick all season just because especially Brian Russ is about to return. Rocco McGorty is going to come back at some point this year. But for that first game, really nice start for him after he signed a contract with the Penguins this summer. He gets my first Warrior helmet. But Pat, looks like you are splitting your Warrior helmet for this week.
I am. If you're watching us on YouTube, you saw the graphic, so it has been spoiled. But for my Warrior helmet, I'm splitting it in half this week, and it goes to Kyle Dubas and head coach Dan Muse. I said it earlier this week on the show. I have to give them props and kudos for letting their actions match their words. We heard all in the lead up to training camp and all throughout camp in the preseason that they weren't going to block the young guys. They were going to give the younger players an opportunity. And they did that this past week. We just got done raving about Harrison Brunicke and Ben Kindel because they played in their first NHL games at Madison Square Garden. Artur Shilovs gets the start in net. Dan Muse has no loyalty to Tristan Jarry. Jarry has not been his goaltender for more than just a couple of months since he has been hired as head coach. Shilovs had the better camp. He gives Shilovs the first start. You look at a lot of the other players in the lineup, there were some younger guys put into more prominent, more higher level roles. And listen, we're going to do in our Thursday episode our bold takes. We're finally going to do our bold predictions. And here's something I'll tease for one of my bold predictions. This is also a way to keep a guy like Sidney Crosby happy, because if you can get him some fresh young talent that shows him there's potential here, it's going to make it a lot more difficult for him to ask out if he can see that light at the end of the tunnel. And while we don't need to put up the mission accomplished banner, but Dan Muse and Kyle Dubas deserve that credit for saying we are going to give these young guys an opportunity to play in the NHL. And instead of just saying it, they went right along with it and let them play.
And this won't be the last of the young players that you see in the NHL this year. You're going to see Tristan Brose come up, I think, at some point. I think Avery Hayes is going to be up at some point as well. I do think they're going to call up Boko Imama at least for a few games as well, just because they like him in the locker room. They like that he brings that physical edge to the lineup when he plays. I definitely think he's going to come up at least at some point this season for a few games. So again, there's going to be other younger players. I'll throw Owen Pickering in there as well. I'd like to think that he's going to come up at some point as well. Those are just 4 right there. Hell, we may even see Sergei Miroshov at the end of the season. So that's 5 right there, especially if Tristan Jarry doesn't really play that well. So this is just the start of some of these younger players getting more opportunities. I think you're going to see more. And, as for Sid, had the biggest smile on his face when he gave Dan Muse that puck last night for getting his first win as head coach. Definitely seems like, he has all the respect in the world for him, even though it's only been 1 game. But, speaking of that, really nice to get on here talking about a win. We'll see if they can make it 2 on Thursday. And speaking of that, we'll have our preview episode out early in the morning on Thursday. Penguins Islanders, the home opener for the Penguins. You also get to see Matthew Schaefer, number 1 overall pick. Should be a lot of fun.
For sure. And before we wrap it up, one other thing that we are doing this season with Warrior Helmet Wednesday, because we've had some people ask about this. We're tracking it this year. So to date, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the tracker up on your screen. But for now, we've got just one with a bunch of people tied for it. Sergei Murashov, Benjamin Kindel, Kyle Dubas, Dan Muse, and Justin Brazeau have the only Warrior helmets after 2 weeks. We'll keep a track of this, and then you'll see at the end of the season who gets our season-long Warrior helmet by collecting the most Warrior helmets. But that is going to do it for our Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins. For Hunter Hodes, I am Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will talk to you early on Thursday morning to get you ready for Penguins Islanders.